this amazing entrepreneur that I met. I want to say it's almost 6 years ago, which seems like it's a lifetime ago, and she has just absolutely killed it since then. Like, I think we sat down and chatted at the Portland Cocktail Week 6 years ago, and she was contemplating opening her first restaurant or first bar. And then all of a sudden, like in the last 6 years, nothing has pretty much stopped her. And she's in the process of opening a venue during this crazy time that we have in the industry right now. So I'm very, 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 very stoked to have Jill Cockson, award-winning bartender and entrepreneur out of Kansas City, with me on the show. I'm just going to do one more thing before I jump onto bringing her on, just so that everybody out there can comment. So if you're watching the live stream, you can comment along and ask questions, and that'll be passed on to Jill, and she can answer any questions you've got. But thank you so much for joining me today, Jill.
Hey, thanks. Good to see you.
Good to see you. It has been a while. Like, I always feel like it's been interesting with the podcast and stuff, because I have a list of people that I want to interview face to face. And that list is getting smaller and smaller, because as these lockdowns and these travel restrictions continue, it's like, okay, there's no tails this year. So that's like 25 people I would have interviewed that I need to rotate into my live streams. Because I like face to face a bit more than technological like advances like this, where you can talk via Zoom, via Restream, and all that sort of stuff. So how's your year been? Well, how was 2020? Let's kick off. Like, yeah, it's only 25 days into it, but
yeah, 2020. I mean, like everybody else, it was pretty surreal. It's not, we're not over it yet, but we actually opened a second location in Kansas City during the pandemic. We opened in June. And then working on the next one right now. For us, we're, like I said, we're small, all of our concepts are very small, very low overhead, very sustainable, and proving to be resilient, even through this, which gives me hope, to participate in a conversation going forward about our industry and using it as an opportunity to recognize sustainability issues that need to be worked on in the industry in general.
I've been preaching this from the get-go for owners, operators, and staff alike, that if you come out of COVID the same way you went in, that you've sort of have missed the point of what COVID has, like the silver lining of COVID and the lockdowns and stuff has created, in a way that if you come out of it thinking we're going to do this in the same way, the industry the same way, or if you're a staff member that you didn't do any of the free training that was available and stuff like that, like you're sort of missing the opportunity of this sort of time on your hands.
Absolutely. Everything we've found ways to improve. We use the shutdown time to make some aesthetic improvements. We've improved, but I think, best practices at the bar. Some of the things we should have been doing before, but some of the COVID restrictions, going to a completely touch-free garnish system, that has not proved to be difficult, and I'm sure we'll keep it going forward. Everything from just tightening up, responsibilities, labor, prep, just everything, everywhere you can work to increase efficiencies and also increase secondary and tertiary revenue streams. It's forced everybody to get creative, and I feel like the ones that are most of the ones that are succeeding, or surviving, I should say, are the ones where you just see boots on the ground and heads coming together and people getting creative, and I think that's where our industry thrives. We're full of hardworking, creative people, and I think we're seeing that shine right now with a lot of places.
Do you feel that COVID is just another big hurdle? I feel like our industry, as operators and managers and stuff, like every day there's a hurdle on every day. It might be a small hurdle, like, oh, one of the toilets blocked up, or your bar back didn't show up on a Friday night because he was hungover from the night before. I just feel like it's a big hurdle, but it's just another hurdle in our industry. Like, this is literally, we're fire people. Like, we come in and put out a fire every single day.
Yeah, I always refer to our industry as professional whack-a-mole. It's kind of like if you don't thrive with whack-a-mole, like you're just, it's a controlled chaos. Like you said, you come in with a plan for the day, and then, oh shit, the door lock mechanism's broke, or the toilet's not working, or the freezer went out last night. Whatever it is, it's you're just constantly adapting. And I think that's where it's one of the areas that I've been, I guess, not disappointed to see, but because that's the nature of our industry, I was a little, I guess, maybe surprised to see a lot of people cave so quickly, to not even try to come up with second attempts. We've seen places close that I feel like didn't even do anything to try to adapt, or didn't even try to, and I realize certainly there's a lot of business models that just weren't going to be able to survive with the restrictions that were put in place. But there were also a lot of places that, I think, man, if they just would have tried something. And as far as a hurdle, I mean, it's a hurdle, but I hear a lot of people talking about returning to normal, and I don't think that's something we should do either. I mean, normal for our industry isn't good. It's by and large, it fails. But by and large, the majority of places that open fail, and so I don't think that's something that we should aspire to return to. I think that we should look at this as an opportunity to figure out where we can do better.
Do you think we romance the past a lot? Like, do you think that we romance our systems? We romance the fact that our technology is not really like. And I know that I want to talk about your TED talk from last year because I really enjoyed it because I'm a bit of a techie. So for me and a friend of mine and I, when we set up his parents' restaurant, we did renovations. It's a 40-year-old New York Italian style place here in Victoria. Been around for 40 years. Do 650 covers a day during service. And when he took over only like 5 years ago, he put in a POS. Before that was still all handwritten chits and like counted off yourself, calculated the whole shebang. Do you think that sometimes we romance the past? And I agree with you in the new normal. Like our systems are flawed, the way we do business is flawed, even our culture. Our culture is flawed.
Absolutely. And I love Jessica Sanders is one of my favorite people in the industry. And I heard her say a great quote one night. So I don't know if it's her or if she got this from somewhere, but I repeat it all the time. I got it from her is acclimating to a bad system doesn't make it a good one. And I think that that's something that we all need to keep in mind at all times, that just because you're used to doing things one way, we've always done it this way, doesn't make it a good system. You really do have to think critically about your systems. And as you evolve, as trends evolve, as your business plans evolve, you need to think critically about each one and about, how those processes function for your brand and in your business environment. And always be critical of your own systems, and I adhere to a lot of old school systems because they work for my size and scale. But I do realize that there is a size and scale where they would not work. And, everybody just needs to kind of, I think, pick on that spectrum where they are and choose what technologies and evolutions are appropriate for them.
So let's take it back. I'm a bit of a comic book nerd. I got rid of my comic book stuff behind me because it just the way my room's set out now. But I've got like a whole stack load of comic books in my corner and whatnot, and Funko Pop freaking Hulks and Tony Starks on my bar top. Where did you get your start? How did you get into the industry in the way that you've gone from starting in the industry to right now?
I think, like most people, I got into the industry because I was bartending through college. It was a way to not have to work 7 nights a week in retail and be able to pay my rent and bills and have some time to study. And then, of course, I pursued a completely non-practical degree, and that was expensive. And I came out of college with a lot of debt, and I was making more money as a bartender than I was going to with, an entry-level professional position.
What was the degree?
So I stayed the course. After about a year of grad school, kind of just decided to cut my losses altogether. Just realized I was digging that hole deeper and deeper, and there wasn't going to be much of an employment future that justified it. And I liked what I did. Kind of during that time, somewhere along the line, I fell in love with what I was doing. I got to meet interesting people all the time. I've always been a night person. I've never been a 9-to-5er. So a lot of things just kind of worked out. And then I would say it wasn't until about 13 years into my career where I had an opportunity to come on as an owner with the other room. I think that's about the time we met. We might have met earlier than 2015. But I was lucky to be able to test kind of some business theories in a market on somebody else's dime, but they were willing to bring me in with an earned ownership position. And, our little experiment worked, and it just kind of blew my mind. I felt like I discovered things about the back of businesses in our industry that I wasn't supposed to know. I feel, you just don't have the opportunity to see the numbers. And that's another thing I think we really need to fix. People need to pressure managers and owners to be part of the conversation about numbers, because you really do need to understand as an employee at every level what your function is and what you're bringing to the table, what you're costing, what you could be bringing in. And when people really see that full picture, I think it just, you don't just become a cog in a machine anymore. You start to realize, like, wow, I have an important role. Everybody's important. But yeah, that first venture with the other room in Lincoln was mind blowing. I mean, just things that I had never considered about the business environment. Um, the rule is there's no rules. You start, and I started realizing that there was this amazing opportunity for entrepreneurship that was in reach, that was affordable.
So when it comes to transparency, I feel the same way. So for all my staff on a daily basis, whenever I get the sales figures in, I'll tell them how much we made top line revenue, how much our per head spend was, how many covers we were. Do you find it does breed that level of ownership and them understanding, like, as you said, like understanding exactly what they bring to the table? Like I've had conversations with staff in the past about per head spend, and they're like, "Well, I don't really think that it applies for us." And I'm like, "But why?" I'm like, per head spend is a super important thing to look at.
Absolutely. I mean, everything we share everything. We also do a 5% profit share with non-owner employees. So, the better they understand the numbers and how they work and they're rolling out, the more money they make, a little extra money in their pockets. But it's everything. I mean, it's everything from drinking on the job, which I see as theft in multiple ways. I mean, you're probably not paying for those drinks, and now you're not as good at what you do. And as a result of not being as good at what you do, you are costing the business money. And the entitlement that our industry has developed to be able to show up and burn through other people's cash is one of those like mind-blowing things to me. Everything from just efficiency and setup and prep, everything needs to be grab ready on a Friday night, Saturday night. I don't want to see anybody transferring liquids from bottle to bottle, like juices or whatnot. I want everything to be grab ready and ready to go, prepped ahead of time. I always say the ability for one of our little bars to do one more drink every 15 minutes on just a Friday and Saturday has the potential over the year to translate into $40,000 a year, made or lost. So when you start really getting people to understand every step is important, every misstep is waste, every second that you're spending not making a drink or exchanging money is losing money. Um, I think it starts to paint a different picture for the importance of their role. It starts to instill that sense of pride in what they do.
So with what year did you open up Swordfish Tom's?
What year? 2017.
Man, you've been busy.
Yeah.
So
Crazy is probably a better word.
well, yeah. I just had a conversation with someone about partners, and I was like, my wife doesn't try to understand me, but she accepts me for who I am. Because I think other hospitality people can try and understand you because they're in the same world, but like my wife's out of the industry, like not in the industry, so she just accepts me for who I am. She just sort of pats my head. It's like, yes, dear, no problems at all. You're mentally unstable when you work 14, 15-hour days and just do it 7 days a week. But you have been busy. So Swordfish Tom was your first standalone venue.
Yes. So the other room even though I was so grateful to have the opportunity there, I'm still friends, with partners there. I was never going to be a majority owner, so I got a really, really great education, and the opportunity to attempt a business model that I thought would work, but, hadn't tried yet. And that gave me you know, the empirical evidence, I guess, to attract investors for my own place. I had the P&Ls for that to say, hey, look, I have this concept, it works. And I got the offer to replicate it in Kansas City, which is where I graduated from college. So I moved back to my college town to do Swordfish Tom's as the majority owner. I have partners, but it was the first one I could be the majority owner of.
So what for the uninitiated, what is your concept around Swordfish Tom's?
So we are a, pre-prohibition inspired cocktail and spirits bar. Um, People are going to use the word speakeasy because we're in a basement, with an alley entrance. I don't usually use that word, but it is what it is. We're in an old boiler room, so we take advantage of the the decor and the history of the building. We serve only spirits and cocktails, no beer or wine.
Oh
Um,
wow.
no food. We don't have to have. We're lucky here. We don't have to serve food. We have a tavern license, so people can feel free to grab food next door and bring it with them if they want. But I don't have to deal with it. Um, Other than cocktails to go, that's a weird thing, but maybe we'll get there. Um, yeah, so it's very small. We are even during pre-COVID times, the fire marshal says our capacity is 66. We say it's 30. Um, so, about 35 people, depending on how the groups show up and what size. It's the game of Tetris every night. Um, but I always say your max capacity is the number of people that you can serve well in accordance with your brand. It's not a number on a piece of paper on the wall. So we adhere to that very strictly. And once we hit the point where, the room is full and if we add more people, it's just going to decrease the value of their experience. We cut it off.
So we were talking about the unique business model that you were talking about that you sort of set in play, and I'm going to keep bringing up that TED talk because I think that everybody needs to. It was called Retrivation and Entrepreneurship, which it was a really good talk. So go through a couple because I think there's some things that people will be like, oh well, that's speakeasy-ish or alley bar-ish. Alley bar is what we call sort of speak like what your bar would like Swordfish Tom's would be in Australia. Like they're not really speakeasies, but they're down the alleys. So you only do cash. You have no house phone.
Correct.
What are some of the other interesting like it even makes you laugh is like what's some other interesting things that people like you've honed down and you've modeled a niche in a way that instead of being absolutely everything to everybody, which I think now is starting to spring back heavily. What sort of things was going into creating Swordfish Toms that you were like, I have to have this?
So, I also start with, I'm always open to the idea that, I can stand corrected, that maybe there's, me adhering to some of these things is, to my detriment at some point. I might find that out. But for now, this works. We are just simple. My dad ran grocery stores back before there were barcodes, when we were hand counting inventory and actually having to do the math and spreadsheets and paper. And I just fell in love with that. I fell in love with the simplicity and the ability to have a bird's eye view of your numbers, to have a hands-on relationship with your inventory. We're small enough that we can do a 10th of the bottle count every week. If I was a giant club in Vegas, I might not be able to do that. That smallness has its advantages. Just like in any sort of martial arts situation, there's advantages to being huge, there's advantages to being small, and you have to learn where your advantages are. We're cash only. So instead of paying Visa a percentage of my money, I gain $1 transaction fee. We own the ATM, so I get to keep that $1 off of every transaction. And what it does, it's not about everybody thinks it's about skimming off the top, or you get to be like cash only. It's like what it really does is speed up transaction time for us. On a Friday and Saturday night, I have to be able to turn the room 6 times if I want to hit our goals. And I can't be caught up messing with buttons and electronics. And, I hate the idea that it takes longer to ring a drink in sometimes than it takes to make it. I realize some of the POS systems are getting better, but, I just wanted it to be very quick. So in exchange for that $1, we can also keep our price points a little lower. We don't have any expenses associated with the POS system every month. We don't have to deal with, any of the technology of it going down. It's just a very quick, easy transaction process for us. And we gain that secondary income stream from our ATM. Our ATM here in Lincoln, our ATM, our dollar fee almost paid our rent every month. The rent in Lincoln, it was obnoxiously low. Like, I will make people cry if I say how low our rent was. But in Kansas City, our ATM at Swordfish pays about 20% of our rent, and at the other space about half of our rent. So that just adding those little secondary income streams, like and then offsetting your balance sheet that way is huge.
I think that's a big thing. I've been preaching sort of doing way more sort of formulas and stuff. And I talked to a lot of operators. I'm like, what's your break even point? And they're like, and like you said, Visa and MasterCard and those things. Like, I remember I was talking to an old restaurateur. He's been in the business for like 50 years. And he was like, back in the day, we just walk up to the bank with like bags of cash. Myself, my partner, my manager, just bags of cash. And we just drop it off. Now I got to pay $25,000 a year to freaking MasterCard and Visa just to have the privilege of taking card payments. It is an interesting. It is when people don't really understand. Like, I've seen a lot of people's like projected P&Ls, and you look at they don't put the cost of credit card things in there. I'm like, it's a massive expense. So I'm very curious. Actually, I was reading a couple of articles about yourself. You were a black belt in Taekwondo when you were 10 years old.
Oh yeah, but I couldn't fight my way out of a wet paper bag point in my life. So yeah, but yeah, I had a great. The instructor I had was awesome. He was super inspirational.
And then I read the article that you were paralyzed from the knees down when you were 15.
Yeah, actually, so the injury was mid back, but the permanent damage ended up being a neuropathy in my feet. Basically all the damage. Luckily for me, they told me at first I wasn't going to walk again, and then luckily the permanent damage ended up being peripheral nerve damage, not my actual spinal cord. So where those nerves led was about knees down on both sides. So my feet don't work. I don't have any pain. Just my feet don't work. I wear braces on my feet to keep them flat. But that's the irony. The silver lining of that is what has forced me to think about efficiency of steps. I don't think I would be near the efficiency-minded bartender or bar owner if that were not a forced situation for me. And I only hope to be able to use my experience to help other people think about that, how important those steps are by minimizing the steps that your bartenders make. You do everything from reduce potential injuries and collisions to minimizing the number of people on staff on a particular night. If you can get it down to one or two bartenders instead of three, because everything is where it needs to be, and it's a Ferrari. Now they all make more money because they're not splitting tips 3 ways; they're splitting tips 2 ways. You retain your staff. I mean, all of these gears. I use the analogy of a bicycle a lot. People often have all the bike parts. They have the pedals, they have the seat, they have the handlebars, they have the gear. They have the chain, but none of it's the right size to work together. Your business needs to be a machine that is geared correctly to actually run. And the more efficient you make that, you hit this sweet spot where you can make more money on less people. Our industry needs to stop and have more math-driven models and less passion-driven models, in my opinion. Not that passion's not important. I mean, it is, but the work smarter, not harder. I know it sounds so cliche, but it's absolutely true when you start thinking about the math of how these gears work together. You can do simple things and make more money than you would on something twice the size.
100%. I always sort of it's all well and good to have passion, but if you can't keep the lights on, your passion sort of dwindles very, very quickly. If there's no place for if there's no crucible for your passion to exist in, then there's no real point having passion whatsoever. So let's move on to Drastic Measures. When did you open Drastic Measures last year? Is that right?
Yeah, we opened. So oddly, this was not planned, but both bars have the same birthday of June 22nd. Swordfish opened June 22nd of 17, and Drastic opened June 22nd of 2020.
And what's the theme behind Drastic Measures?
It's basically the same. Like I said, this model is so replicable. It's basically the same as Swordfish. It's got a different. You can tell we're sisters in operation. I have a partner out there. His name's Jay Sanders, who I brought on to basically kind of be in charge of that one. He's actually also participating in an earned ownership position out there. I'm really proud of that. Basically, I came in as the majority owner of Drastic with the money partners, and Jay is starting out as a 10% owner. And over the course of 5 years, he will earn the 50% ownership position, and I will stay on as the permanent 10. He was really ready, ambitious and ready for an ownership position, and just needs that little extra, experience to look at things through owner goggles instead of through manager goggles. He has tremendous management experience, but that's another thing that, another layer that our industry lacks. We lack mentorship from into higher roles. So people often get promoted from bartender to manager with no experience as manager, and then they tank a business because they might have been a great bartender, but they had no management skills. And same can be said from the jump from management to ownership. If you were a great manager but never learned to look at things through ownership eyes, or never got the opportunity to, you're going to fail. And if you can't fake it till you make it, or if you don't have enough capital to make the mistakes and learn from them, you're screwed. So I'm really enjoying the idea of putting together, mentorship to ownership positions.
And how do you go about that, breeding that sort of culture? Because I do agree with you, like you're not necessarily in our sort of style of place. Well, it does happen. Like you're the bar manager leaves and you're the most senior bartender. So guess what? You're the manager now.
Right.
You've been here for 3 months. You're the manager now. And you're just like, okay, cool. But I talk to a lot of these kids, and I'm like, so how do you do your costings? And I think that goes true to chefs as well. Like back of house is just as bad as front of house when it comes to that. So how do you breed the culture to sort of be so self-aware that this is the direction that you need to take?
Well, one is, hyper communication. Me leading by example. That I to this day, I work both bars, and at the end of the shift, I clean the toilets and mop the floors, and there's nothing I'm expecting anybody to do that I don't do myself, on top of the administrative things, and having open conversations with them on shifts about how I spent my day and what, and giving them the opportunity to ask questions, and how much does your bookkeeper cost? One of my bartenders right now is working on opening a place, and I love that I can be, like where my information proves to be beneficial to him. I love that I can help him along the way and help him put together a pro forma for a business. You said the break even number, earlier, and it blows my mind how many business owners can't tell you that. I mean, that should just be a number that immediately. The break even number for both places, luckily for us, is low. Because we have such low overhead. But man, it's mind blowing how many people in the industry just can't even tell you that simple fact. Not having management. I always say that our industry is kind of I refer to it as a fetish industry. It's the industry that everybody wants to do in their retirement. You never hear somebody say, I want to open a little auto shop when I'm retired. Nobody says that. They say, I want to open a bar or a restaurant. That seems to be everybody's dream. And the problem with that is if you don't have experience as a manager or owner, you don't have even the basic skill set to vet and hire your general manager. It'd be like me being hired to vet and hire the next round of surgeons for a heart hospital. I have no ability to do that. I can look at a bunch of resumes. Gee, they all look impressive. Oh, sorry, lost myself. They all look impressive, but if you don't have the skill set to be able to ask the right questions, like you said, tell me about your last management job. What were your inventory processes like? What was your break-even numbers? What did you do to improve raise your revenue ceiling and lower your fixed costs, or lower your cost of operations? If they can't answer those questions, they've never had a real manager job. And that's something that sounds mean to say, that the word manager in our industry means nothing to me on a resume. It might mean you locked the door at the end of the night. Cool. I want to know, were you responsible in a tangible way, for the fiduciary success of that business? And if the answer is no, you haven't been a manager.
Yeah. Just drop the mic on that one. I could literally finish the interview off and just go, and that is it. No, it is interesting because I'm back running my old hotel lobby bar from years and years ago. I came back after COVID, and the one thing that the hotel has been very odd about with me being gone and coming back, and obviously hotel mentalities, usually your food and beverage outlets, if they break even, great sort of mentality. And I'm like, nope, we've got to make profit, even with our wage subsidy that we get, which is 75%. I'm still taking that out and still making profit for the hotel. And I'm like, that's where we need to be. And they're like, but why? Like, you can just work. Like, we're getting it covered. I'm like, no, we're not though. I'm not getting covered. Like, I haven't worked a bar shift in a number of weeks just because it hasn't been busy enough with our restrictions and stuff like that. So I've been making sure the staff are looked after and they've got the hours. And like you said, I don't want to go in and split tips 4 ways. I want to let the team work themselves and split 3 ways. So I'm curious at what drives you to, one, Europe and Drastic measures in 2020. Obviously, that takes months and months of extra planning, and then obviously COVID rocked up, and you're like, it's too late now. We've sort of already in 5th gear. What sort of made you? What drives you in the morning to then go and do Chartreuse Saloon in 2021?
I think there's opportunity right now. I mean, I'm really trying to look at COVID as, like I said, the reset button, starting conversations with consumers, even about this is going to be a dialogue that's going to take years, but this is a reset opportunity. And with every major crisis, I really do believe there's always opportunity to re-gear, rebrand, address the different way that people are spending money and establishing brand loyalty. We've also got the millennials taking over the driver's seat of the economy. So there's a shift happening there. Anytime you have a shift, you have opportunity. I think that what people are looking for in an experience when they go out, there's a couple of conversations kind of lingering in the background here. One, I'm going to go back to something you said earlier. There's too many businesses in our industry that don't need to make money. Those passion projects sometimes are funded, and they miscalibrate the guest expectation for value. So what I mean by that is, if I spend, a couple $1 million on a build out of a fancy establishment and I don't need to make money, the reward that I get is by walking into the door and telling all my friends, hey, I own this place and it's great. Isn't it grand? Perfect. That's awesome. Cool if you can do that. But they're selling things at a price point that don't represent the actual cost of that operation. And so what happens is that when people go out and around town and they compare it to other places, and they see like another bar that like a place like mine, that, hey, I do need to make money, and this place is, you know, supporting real people that actually make an income and are the breadwinners of their households, and our price points are the same. My place isn't as fancy, but it's because my place needs to make money, you know. And I think we need to have a conversation about the how that can be pervasive about the guest expectations in a market for what something is actually worth. Fair, sustainable wages. If everybody was actually making a living in our industry, you know, a burger and fries at a sit-down restaurant should start minimum at, you know, $15. You know, I mean, like that's there should not, you know. So, you know, our industry has made a lot of its money on wage theft. You know, it's like, let's talk about, you know, like, there's, like I said, there's so many conversations. So I look at it as an opportunity to provide an example about what can happen as a sustainable model in our industry when you start to create real opportunities, real safe spaces, you know, businesses that can provide things like health insurance, because you don't have 50 employees, you have 4. Another advantage to being small is, you know, we can offer a health insurance stipend to full-time employees because we don't have 50 of them. We have 4, you know. So all of those gears, you know, if you start rethinking the business model and rethinking this as an opportunity to start conversations about like sustainability. I love how our industry loves that word, you know. Cool, you don't use straws, sustainable. Let's talk about business models being sustainable, and let's see people stick around and have real entrepreneurship opportunity in the future.
Do you think that comes a little bit from the we sort of we try and be open and progressive, but we also keep so many cards close to our chests, you know, like even our like mental health and stuff like that. We I've talked about this a ton, and you know, like you have a bad day, like you go into work and the chef's pissed off and the toilets are clogged, and you talk to your accountant and you didn't have a great month last month, but then as soon as service starts, we're did and we're putting on a big show. Do you think that even between industry to industry, peers and mentors and people, that we aren't transparent with ourselves and with our business, because we still hold our cards? Like no one wants to know that the last big award winning bar is hemorrhaging money every month. Like they don't want to know that. So do you think we keep our as operators, we keep our cards close to our chest so much still?
Well, I think, man, there was a lot in that sense. I think, yeah, like I think we should know that those award-winning bars are hemorrhaging money. Like, I mean, I think that's absolutely an issue. That's another thing that we should talk about is like, I mean, because the expectations of would-be entrepreneurs are completely not accurate when it comes to what's doable. You know, they see this tip of the iceberg, this gem star of the bar portfolio, you know, like this award-winning place that is being propped up by either 10 other places that they own, or the fact that they don't need to make money, or that they're hemorrhaging money and nobody knows it. I mean, how many awards panels, you know, have I seen where some of the bars on the list, by the time the actual competition is over, they've closed? You know, it's like, how is this bar on the list for world's best bar, or best whatever, best blah blah blah, and they haven't even been open for a year, or they're already closing. And that's a real conversation. And I know, I mean, it goes so deep. I know it's very sentimental to some people that whose markets are not as sustainable. And I think that's where we have to start having conversations about negotiating leases and you know, like, look, if that, you might have to move. I mean, if you want to be an entrepreneur and be successful and sustainable, if you want to win awards, that's a different path. I have no advice for you. I mean, have millions of dollars, be ready to compete with people who have millions of dollars. That's it. If you want to make a living doing what you love, it is, you know, it is a possibility to be an entrepreneur in our industry. But you might have to move somewhere that's a secondary or tertiary market that's not a cool place to say you live, just because those bubbles are bursting. The rents are outrageous. They're just not sustainable. And then, you know, to your point about the putting on the show every night, I really believe that if we get back to what hospitality really is, about caring for people, and if you're authentic and being able to care, if you are not greedy and you put together a business model that allows you to legitimately care about your staff. I have conversations with, you know, my entire staff weekly. You know, how was your day? When they come through the door, I can say, how was your day? You know, how's it going? If someone was sick, I can catch up with them. When you push the revenue ceiling so high that, you know, like, oh, you know, we have this giant space and we have all these moving parts. Once it goes past that fulcrum of being able to authentically care for people, and that starts with you and your staff, then you're no longer in hospitality. And, you know, I'm not saying you can't be successful down that road, but it's just not anything I want to do. And you can have profitable models, that start with that cornerstone of hospitality being, that functional base. And if you just tether everything to that, the right thing to do becomes obvious in cases. But we have so many toxic work environments in this industry. Like I said, there's a that start precisely because people are chasing money. And I think if you chase hospitality and you set the example of hospitality with your relationship and your staff, the money comes.
Wow, man, you're fierce. It is. I'm. I'm just trying to like take everything in. Yeah, nobody will see that on the podcast. Uh, so 2021, you open up a new venue, Chartreuse Saloon. Um, it is an interesting sort of. I do agree with you that if you look at the silver lining, for COVID, there is a huge opportunity there, and the shifts are a very big play. What's the plan for 2021 now that we're sort of rolling into January and stuff? Where do you see the shift sort of unfolding?
Well, we're certainly not out of the woods politically. I mean, again, I'm small enough I can take a political stance in my bars. We set out to provide safe spaces, and it's important to me that Black Lives Matter and LGBTQ safe spaces, and putting that front and center in our business model, and putting it on the front window of the business. Like, look, you vote with your dollar, and if you don't want to support these causes, don't spend money with me, and I will never have something so big that you know that I am at the mercy of bowing down to let's please everybody. Kind of going back to that, our industry needs to take a couple things on the chin, and that's another one of them. The price points are wrong. We talked about that already. Um, this idea that we got so big and greedy that we had to please everybody that walked in the door, that's where that customer's always right bullshit came from, and we all know that. We all know that that's ridiculous. If two people come in the door and they demand opposite things, it's a simple logic test that they both can't be right. So the real question is, what is your brand about? Know who you are, and know who you're there for, and know who you're not there for. It's okay to not be for everybody, and that doesn't have to be in a condescending kind of a condescending exclusive way. But it's like, look, I don't have to tolerate behaviors. Again, hospitality, I always say this: I hate the word service, because service is derived from the etymology of servitude, servile, servant. That's where we get that. The customer's always right. You bow down to everybody who makes every demand. I like hospitality because hospitality is more of a welcome to my home, but this is my home, and you will respect it. It gives you a position of authority within your business. I want to make sure you have an amazing evening, and thank you so much for choosing us as your backdrop. But there are house rules, just like there would be if you threw a party at your house. You wouldn't allow one of your friends to harass another one of your friends. You wouldn't allow one of your friends to write on your bathroom wall or steal things from you. It's like there are rules at your house. And I feel like if we can again get back to this concept of hospitality being welcome to my home, but I do request of you that you respect my home. And that's where I feel there's opportunity. The Chartreuse Saloon is going to be, honestly, just like a slightly upscale neighborhood bar. It's not a fancy cocktail bar. It's pool tables, nachos, a place where people can feel comfortable and welcome, in a and just kind of leading the way on we can do things well on smaller levels, that, like, again, that are sustainable. I feel like I keep saying that word that, you know, uh, um, set a different pace for our industry and kind of reestablish what entrepreneurship looks like.
And do you think the realities of and self-awareness of entrepreneur, I was just talking to someone before I got on this live stream about how hospitality entrepreneurship almost has one more layer of regular entrepreneurship. It's usually a lot slower. It's not like, it is a completely different mindset, because if you're in the tech world, you start something, you sell it after 2 years, and away you go. Hospitality entrepreneurship has this sort of level, and I've talked to a lot of people. I've been on this new social media platform called Clubhouse the last couple of weeks, and there's a lot of marketing people who have become wine people, and a lot of lawyers who started their own wine store and stuff like that, because that's what they wanted to do when they retired, like we were talking about earlier. Do you feel like hospitality entrepreneurship takes a very special and much more heightened level of awareness or self-awareness to really understand the direction you need to go in to be successful?
I mean, it definitely, I think that's one of the most eye-opening things that happened when we opened the other room in Lincoln was that we broke all the rules for that market. And everybody told us, this will never work. You're a block from Husker Stadium, which everybody, accurately says it's the third largest city in the state when it's full, and it's full every game. And, and we didn't serve beer. So many businesses in that market literally rely on 7 home game weekends financially, because they are relying on that influx of business on those weekends. And we weren't like anti-football. We just didn't cater to them. We didn't have TVs. We didn't serve beer. We didn't pack it in. We didn't increase we did nothing different. Every bar in Lincoln, Nebraska turns into a Husker bar on Husker weekends. We were like the only one that didn't. We did zero to accommodate and people just kept telling us all along the way, like, this will never work. And lo and behold, it's been there since 2013, and it's flying perfectly steady. Other than the mandatory shutdown, it has not missed a beat. And it's because, we realized there was an underserved market there. There's actually people there that don't care about football, and no one is catering to them. And having a solid idea of what and who you are and who you're there for, and never deviating from that, that non-compromise, sure, you want to self-analyze and make adaptations where you need to, but it needs to be hard tethered to who you are. And I think so many places, they open up with not a strong grasp of who they are, or specifically who they're there for. They'll base it off of like, oh, there's a med center in the area, so we expect those people. I'm like, that's not what I'm asking. I'm asking, who are you here for? Who do you want to walk in the door, not who's wandering around outside? And a lot of people can't tell you that. They can't give you a hard idea of who their target demographic is. And as a result of that, they start deviating from, any sort of consistency. They'll give something a month, and I go, that's not working. Let's have Moscow Mule Night, or let's have, let's do this. Let's have and pretty soon they just kind of become non-identifiable as, and so they're kind of like that everything to everybody again. And I'm not so arrogant as to believe that everybody's going to love what I do. We're not going to be everybody's jam, and I'm happy to give somebody a recommendation like, hey, we don't serve beer, but if you're a beer person, I have so many great recommendations for you that are close by. We know who we are, and we know that we're not going to please everybody. And I want everybody to have a great night, even if it's not at my place, so I think being small enough to be able to to make a recommendation for somebody to have a better place somewhere else, is a start.
So I don't want to take up more of your time. You've dropped so many bombs. I've got so much stuff to think about. Everything has been amazing. I want to leave the episode with one piece of advice you'd give a young bartender who's trying to make that, or young manager who's trying to make that move to opening their own venue. Whether the driver is they've never worked for someone who is someone like you, where they get nurtured and stuff like that. They just want to control a little bit more. What's the one piece of advice for an entrepreneur who's like, you know what, I want to open my own bar?
I would say it's 2 things. First, the first thing you can do immediately is start working on your personal brand, your online presence. Use your real name. Don't use any weird tagline. You are advertising for yourself every time you participate in a discussion. When your name comes up, that is a tagline, little mini billboard out there for you. Figure out what people you aspire to be like, and start participating in their conversations productively. Don't be a shit show online. If you're going to ask somebody for, $200,000 plus of their money, the first place they're going to go is go cyber stalk you. So be aware that your personal brand is front and center always. Don't talk about guests in a negative way don't rant about, things, online that might cast you in a negative light to someone who wants to take you seriously as a potential business owner. 2, work where you can gain measurables about yourself. Before the other room, I worked at a kind of a semi-private country club, and I was lucky to have a good enough working relationship with the manager that I was able to get access to sales and like, hey, if I implement this program, can you tell me where we are now? And can we monitor it for 6 months and tell me if we increase sales? And I was able to start building a personal, measurable resume for myself, so that when I went to a consulting gig, I could say, yeah, I know I grew their sales from this to this by implementing these processes. Make yourself worth something, to investors. You have to have measurables. And if you're not working for people who are going to give you access to those, I realize it's a luxury to be able to switch jobs, and not everybody can do that at a moment's notice. But work hard to work for people who will give you access to those measurables so that you can start marketing yourself and knowing what role you're playing in the profitability of a business.
Wow. I've loved this conversation. I knew it was going to be good. I knew it was going to be like really, really good. I'm going to definitely reiterate to everybody, go Google the TEDx talk from Jill. It is spectacular. It's only 11 minutes long, but it drops more nuggets of epic goodness. Thank you so much for your time, Jill. I really appreciate it.
Have a good day.
You too. Have a